Hands up. Step out of the tent now. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Not just wrong, twisted. I wasn't in some sketchy parking lot or trespassing in a city park. I was on land my grandfather bought 60 years ago. Land I grew up on. Land I legally owned. And yet, there I was, surrounded by police. Flashlights blinding me. A smug HOA president standing behind them like a villain in a courtroom drama. Lydia Warwick. Silver hair, power suit, eyes like sharpened steel. She claimed I was on community property. Waved some official-looking folder like it was gospel. And I'll admit, half awake. Heart pounding. Adrenaline firing. I started to doubt myself. But here's the thing no one expected. I don't back down. Especially not on ground where I learned to fish with my grandfather, where I watched morning fog rise off the lake like the breath of ancestors. This wasn't just about a lake. This was about a legacy. And they didn't realize, while they were busy playing HOA tyrants, I was about to uncover something they never thought. I'd find fraud, moved boundary markers, secret payments, event profits funneled into personal bank accounts. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an orchestrated takeover. And it all started with that midnight ambush. When I was jolted from sleep like a fugitive, accused of trespassing on my own land. But that's the funny thing about people who get too comfortable with power. They think paperwork and intimidation are enough to erase truth. What they didn't realize was I had something they couldn't fake. History. My name on the deed, original maps, old letters from my grandfather saying, "Never let anyone take what's rightfully yours." And that's exactly what I intended to do. So if you're watching this, know this isn't just a petty neighborhood dispute. This is a warning. Because the system they used to bully you, I tore it apart, piece by piece. And what I found changed everything. They thought I'd just go away, that I'd be too scared or too broke to fight back. But they underestimated two things: my memory, my receipts. After that night, I didn't sleep much. I started digging, and what I found in the county archives would make your blood run cold. See, Lydia and her HOA board weren't just protecting some community, picnic space. They were protecting a con. Decades ago, the lakefront parcels were split. My grandfather kept Lot 14, the one with direct access to the water. But sometime around 2004, after my grandfather passed, someone quietly redrew the plat maps. Just a few feet here, a few feet there. Suddenly, Lot 14 didn't reach the shoreline anymore. A new common area magically appeared. Guess who maintained control over that common area? The HOA. And guess who had been charging residents to host events on it ever since? Lydia and her inner circle. And it gets worse. Event permits were filed under the HOA's name, but payments, real money, sometimes thousands per weekend, went to a private LLC registered to a L. Warwick and written under Harder the ATN Fredinton Associates. On paper, it looked legit, but it wasn't. It was theft, plain and simple. From me, from the community, from every family that paid to use the land that, legally, wasn't even theirs. So I started documenting everything. Original maps, deeds, video evidence of the altered boundary markers, even old Christmas cards my grandfather exchanged with the first HOA president, where they clearly referenced your lakeside lot. When I confronted them at the next HOA meeting, camera rolling, folder thick with evidence, they laughed. Lydia said, "No one's going to believe your little story." I said, "It's not a story. It's an affidavit. And tomorrow, it's going to court." And that's when it shifted. You could see it in their faces. The panic. Because the moment truth enters the room, fraud starts to sweat. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse smelled like old coffee and fresh nerves. I walked in with a file box under one arm and 3 neighbors behind me, each of them clutching their own stories, their own scraps of evidence. People were starting to realize this wasn't just about me reclaiming access to the lake. This was about how much the HOA had taken from everyone. Lydia showed up late. Her lawyer, A smug man in expensive shoes and a cheap grin tried to get the case dismissed on procedural grounds. Frivolous, he called it. Emotionally driven. But when the judge saw the original 1973 plat map, signed, sealed, and certified, her eyebrows lifted. "Where did this come from?" she asked. "The county recorder's office," I said. "Filed by my grandfather. The land has never been legally transferred or modified through proper channels." Then I handed her the forensic survey I'd commissioned just weeks earlier. It clearly showed Lot 14, extending right to the shoreline, exactly as originally recorded. Suddenly, it wasn't just a property dispute. It was fraudulent misrepresentation. The judge ordered an immediate injunction. Lydia's lawyer tried to object, but it was too late. The gavel fell like a warning shot. Within 48 hours, the so-called common area was roped off, pending investigation. No more paid events. No more HOA-sponsored picnics. No more Lydia presiding over the dock like a queen. The whispers started almost immediately. Neighbors who'd once sided with her now crossed the street to avoid her. A retired couple down the block filed a class action suit to recover. Thousands in event donations. They'd been strong-armed into making over the years. Even the local paper got wind of it. Headline: Lake Access Lies. Homeowner uncovers HOA land grab. By the end of the month, Lydia had resigned. Her lawyer stopped returning calls. And I stood at the edge of the dock, barefoot, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over water my family had always owned. Finally free of the gate, the chain, and the lies. Because some things aren't just worth fighting for. They're worth winning. 6 months later. The gate is gone now. So is the HOA president's throne of patio, furniture, and passive-aggressive signage. In their place, a new wooden bench, carved by one of the retired neighbors, and a painted sign that reads, Public Access, Lot 14, Est, 1973, reclaimed 2025. The lake has changed, but more importantly, so have we. After the court ruling, the HOA board was forced to hold new elections. People actually showed up this time. No more blank proxies or quiet railroading. We elected a retired school principal as president, a single mom as treasurer, and a war veteran as secretary. Transparency became more than just a buzzword. It was printed in bold at the top of every meeting agenda. As for me, I never planned to be the face of a movement. I just wanted to watch the sunrise from my dock like my grandfather did. But something happened in the process. Neighbors who used to wave from across lawns now sat beside me at potlucks, swapped stories, helped replant flowers by the shoreline. We started hosting community cleanups instead of fundraisers. A teenager painted a mural on the utility shed. Someone set up a seed library. The lake became ours again, truly and wholly. Lydia moved away in late spring. Her house sold below asking, and no one misses the clipped emails or the whispered threats. But we do keep a framed copy of the original plat map in the new community center. A reminder that what's right isn't always what's popular, and that truth, once unearthed, can't be buried again. And every morning, just like clockwork, I step out onto that dock, coffee in one hand, gratitude in the other, and breathe in the air of a place not just restored, but reborn. It started with a few emails, then a phone call from a nearby town, then another. Turns out, our story struck a nerve. Within weeks of the court ruling, residents from other neighborhoods reached out, asking how we did it. Some suspected their HOAs were similarly overstepping, blocking access to shared greenbelts, misusing dues, intimidating homeowners. They wanted advice, templates, moral support. We gave them everything we had. Someone built a website, accessforall.org, to house court documents, our legal arguments, even scanned copies of the original subdivision maps. Thank you, Bernice, for digitizing them from the archives. Local news picked up the story. Then regional, then NPR. The movement had a name now. The Quiet Reclaimers. We didn't march. We didn't shout. We we researched. We remembered who the land was meant for, and we stood up even when we were shaking. By midsummer, 3 other neighborhoods had successfully challenged. their own illegal restrictions. One even overturned a rule banning children from riding bikes on community sidewalks. It turns out, when neighbors talk, really talk, change happens. The lake was the catalyst, but the revolution was relational. Now, every July 4th, we host what we call the People's Picnic. No permits, no formalities, just blankets on the grass, fireworks reflected in the lake, and a circle of humans who learned what it means to reclaim more than land, to reclaim community, to reclaim voice, to reclaim each other. It started with a few emails, then a phone call from a nearby town, then another. Turns out, our story struck a nerve. Within weeks of the court ruling, residents from other neighborhoods reached out, asking how we did it. Some suspected their HOAs were similarly overstepping, blocking access to shared greenbelts, misusing dues, intimidating homeowners. They wanted advice, templates, moral support. We gave them everything we had. Someone built a website, accessforall.org, to house court documents, our legal arguments, even scanned copies of the original subdivision maps. Thank you, Bernice, for digitizing them from the archives. Local news picked up the story, then regional, then NPR. The movement had a name now. The Quiet Reclaimers. We didn't march. We didn't shout. We read. We researched. We remembered who the land was meant for, and we stood up even when we were shaking. By midsummer, 3 other neighborhoods had successfully challenged their own illegal restrictions. One even overturned a rule banning children from riding bikes on community sidewalks. It turns out, when neighbors talk, really talk, change happens. The lake was the catalyst, but the revolution was relational. Now, every July 4th, we host what we call the People's Picnic. No permits, no formalities, just blankets on the grass, fireworks reflected in the lake, and a circle of humans who learned what it means to reclaim more than land, to reclaim community, to reclaim voice, to reclaim each other. We used to think the lake was just water and reeds, a place for occasional walks, maybe a paddle boat rental in the summer. But it turned out to be a mirror, a place that reflected not just trees and clouds, but what kind of neighborhood we had become. We learned more than property law. We learned how silence becomes permission, how just going along. Can erode rights the same way? Water slowly wears down stone. But we also learned how one bold question, can they actually do that, can start a landslide. The truth is, we weren't activists. We were librarians, retirees, engineers, teachers, exhausted parents with full inboxes. But once we saw the injustice clearly, we couldn't unsee it. And when we stood up, we found we weren't alone. So here's what we leave behind. For anyone standing on the edge of their own blocked shoreline, start small, read the documents, knock on a door, ask uncomfortable questions, find the maps, the literal ones, the legal ones, the social ones that reveal who has power and why. Hold space for disagreement. Not everyone will join you at first. Some may never. That's okay. Document everything, emails, minutes, photos, memories. 1 day they may be evidence. Keep the long view. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but it comes when people endure. And finally, don't fight just to win. Fight to restore, to bring things back to what they were supposed to be. Shared, loved, lived in together. If the water is calm today, it's because enough of us stepped into it when it was rough. And we do it again. A few weeks after the final vote, after the no trespassing, signs came down and the path to the lake reopened. We saw something we hadn't seen in months. A boy with a red plastic bucket, ankle deep in the water. His grandmother sat on a bench nearby, waving at a neighbor walking their dog. Someone had left a little painted rock near the edge of the trail. You belong here. It was small, quiet, unremarkable. But for us, it felt like a revolution. Because winning wasn't about speeches or lawsuits, or making the news, though sometimes those things helped. It was about reclaiming something invisible. A sense of shared space, shared ownership, shared care. The idea that public doesn't mean no one's, it means everyone's. That lake isn't just a body of water. It's a boundary that held our stories, our arguments, our efforts. And when we pushed back together, we didn't just protect access to it. We protected access to each other. Resources and reflections for your fight. If you're reading this because your community is facing something similar, here's a short guide to begin. Start with documents. Review HOA bylaws, city easements, plat maps, zoning codes. Gather people, not just opinions. Host potlucks. Form message groups. Listen more than you speak. Find allies with knowledge. Local journalists, legal aid clinics, municipal records clerks. Many will help if you ask clearly. Keep records of everything. Decisions made in shadows can only be reversed in daylight. Map the land and map the power. Where does the public space end? Who benefits if it disappears? Remember what's at stake. You're not just fighting fences. You're fighting for belonging. And never forget, you don't have to be the right kind of person to stand up. You just have to begin.